Hi, I'm Luis Enrique Gracia, and I'm going to present my pro experiment titled Ending Hunger in the World, Mali Study. The aim of this project is to end hunger in the world by implementing innovative ideas. The idea that is going to be presented for ending hunger in the world is using drones that carry the food from developed countries to poor countries. And this idea is really difficult to study due to the big dimensions that we are talking about, the world. A study much smaller is going to be done. Concretely, the study is going to be focused on how Spain could end hunger in Mali. It has been chosen Mali because it is one of the most poorest countries in the world. So if it is possible to finish the hunger in Mali, it will be possible to end hunger in another country. So I'm going to talk about 5 main points because are the 5 points that have been developed in the report. The first one, a Mali study. So I have done a study of Mali about the situation, the economic, political, and situation of Mali, and I'm just going to highlight 2 things. The first one is about the population of Mali. Mali has over 70.5 million people living there, where the 36% of the population lives below the poverty line. This makes 7.3 million poor people. So this is our target, to feed these 7.3 million people. And also the second point that is important of Mali is the conflict situation of Mali. All the north part of Mali is submitted to war conflicts. The conflicts should be taken into account for the distribution of the food by the drones in the country, because if there is some country and there are terrorist groups, they could knock out these drones and for providing themselves of food. Okay, so these are the 2 main things of Mali. Then the second point is a food study. So the first step to carry out this study is to analyze the cost of feeding a person of about 16 years old in 1 year. It has been chosen this age because it's the average of the population in Mali. Yes, 16 years old. So first of all, we have to say that everyone is going to be fed with 3 meals: breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So finally, when the study had been done, it could be seen in the report that for feeding a 16 years old Malian for 1 month and 1 year, it's needed for 1 month almost 33 euros, and for 1 year almost 400 euros. Okay? Then the third point of the report is about the organization of shipping the food and the initial investment. So now I'm going to summarize the 5 points taking into account for the organization and the initial investment, that there are a propaganda campaign, the way of financing, receiving centers in Spain, how shipping drones from Madrid to Mali, Madrid, and finally the receiving centers in Mali. So taking into account all these 5 points, finally we can see that the total cost for paying for feeding the 7.3 million people is more or less more than 3,000 million euros. Okay, but like I'm saying, including feeding all the 7.3 poor people. Then for the 4th point, it's about the shipping with drones. Okay, with a study made in the report, taking into account the timing that the drone should take for going to Mali, dropping the food without stopping and going back to Madrid, and the drone, and taking also into account the drone's weight capacity, it has been calculated that the number of drones needed is 357, and the cost of these drones is really high, it's really expensive. It's about 65,000 million euros. So these are things to take into account for the financing. That is the last point, our 5 points of the report. So this 5 point is a deeper study of financing. It's going to be considered 2 ways of financing. The first one, the one mentioned in the report, is about the Spanish population participation with the receiving centers in Al Campo establishment. And the second way will be with a percentage of the contribution of the GDP per capita of Spain. So, in conclusion, in relation with the results obtained, the price to pay for ending hunger in Mali is really high. If it is considered the pavement of the A400M drones. If we take into account this, the amount of the price of the drones, for the first year, each of the active population in Spain should pay more than 3,000 euros, or the Spanish government should use the 5.8% of the GDP per capita. This is too much, and it will be a milestone, by my point of view, too high to be reached. On the other hand, if the drone cost is not taken into account, the amount of money to be paid is much more reasonable. The active Spanish population should pay 155 euros each year, or the Spanish government should use the 0.27% of the GDP per capita. Okay, so this is more reasonable. So finally, well, this study made between Spain and Mali should be extrapolated to the rest of the world for ending the hunger in the world. Each poor country should be studied in the same way as it was studied in this project. So well, I wish you like my study, and well, thanks for your listening.